Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Mindspeak is tomorrow, the 22nd of February from 5 o'clock at the Intercontinental Mara Ballroom. We'll start at 5 and end around 7. And we'll be hosting Albert Mugo, who's the CEO and Managing Director of Kengen, and 3 of his key officers to cover various components of the story. If you're curious about what Mindspeak is, have a look at this little link. What is Mindspeak? It's a free to attend forum, and it really has a great following, and it's a wonderful event. So if you can make it, please do. And we've done a little teaser. I went to see Albert earlier in the week to have a look at that as well. Macro thoughts: Davos gets jittery as Trump rises, oil falls and China slows. We have a coming together of events that are confusing, volatile and dangerous. This is David Gergen. I've been to so many Davoses, Dalio said, and when it's quiet, that's when you should panic. Home thoughts went back to the hot springs at Lake Magadi, where I haven't been for eternity. I really want to get down there again. It's such a beautiful place. It's quite remote. It's completely sun-baked, and you have these amazing hot springs there. Very alkaline water, said to have magic powers. It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. E.E.Cummings. Trust your heart if the seas catch fire. Live by love, though the stars walk backward. Trust your heart if the seas catch fire. Live by love, though the stars walk backward. Rather good, isn't it? Midtown Manhattan is pictured from the top of the United Nations building in New York following a blizzard caused by Storm Juno in January 2015, and apparently a snowstorm dubbed a sleeping giant is predicted to hit the northeast of the US later this week, possibly including the cities of New York, Washington, Philadelphia and Boston. Political reflections: the St. Elijah's monastery in Mosul, which stood as a place of worship for 1400 years, is thought to have been razed to the ground in 2014, which is a great shame. A 1920s photo shows a ceremony at the monastery where a Christian community thrived for centuries. And I'll put up another photograph of US Army forces touring St. Elijah's Monastery in 2008. My mother was very eclectic, and she said it didn't matter where you were. If you're in a holy place, your prayer counted. And I feel that way as well. And I just think it's so barbaric, attacking people's very precious places. When a nation is powerful, it tells confident stories about the future. This is how It Felt Like a Kiss by Adam Curtis starts. You have to watch it if you haven't. I've been talking about it several times. Planet of Fear, Pepe Escobar. The Davos Annual Talk Fest is about to begin. That's one of those occasions when the masters of the universe, who usually decide everything behind closed doors, send their minions to debate the future of their holdings. The current debate centers on whether we are still in the midst of the third digitalized industrial revolution and the Internet of Things, or whether we're already entering the fourth. In the real world, though, all the cackle is about the age of old-fashioned oil, which brings us to the myriad effects of the cheap oil strategy deployed by the House of Saud under Washington's command. Persian Gulf traders off the record are adamant there is no longer any real global oil surplus of consequence, as all shut-in oil has been dumped on the market based on that Washington command. Petroleum Intelligence Weekly estimates the surplus is at a maximum 2.2 million a day, plus 600,000 barrels a day coming from Iran later this year. The US consumption of oil has not increased. It's the other 80% that have been mostly absorbing the dumped oil. That explains why Russia's Deputy Finance Minister Maxim Oreshkin issued a sort of keep calm and carry on message. He expects oil prices to remain in the $40 to $60 range for at least the next 7 years, and Russia can live with that. The masters of the universe, just like the Russians, have realized their oil manipulation cannot last. Hysteria predictably took over. That's why they ordered Wall Street firms to short oil using cash settlement. Compliant US corporate media was ordered to spin the shortfalls will last forever. The target is to drive down the price of a barrel of oil to $7 if possible. That is way beyond what I think most people would have expected. The original masters of the universe strategy would eventually lead to regime change in Russia and the usual oligarch suspects back in the saddle, conducting the massive looting operation Russia suffered during the 1990s. A fearful House of Saud is a mere pawn in the strategy. Assuming the plan would work, the House of Saud, under virtually demented King Salman, now confined to a room in his Riyadh palace, would also be regime changed via Saudi military officers trained in the West and recruited by Western agents. As a bonus, the Islamic Republic of Iran would also collapse with moderates taking control. So the Masters of the Universe strategy essentially boils down to regime change in Russia, Iran and Saudi Arabia, leading to exceptionalism, friendly elites and vassals. In sum, the ultimate chapter in the global resource wars. Yet what is this yielding so far? Is the House of Saud having absolutely no clue of what may happen to them. Riyadh royals may think they are undermining both Iran and Russia, but in the end they may be only accelerating their own demise, and I think I've made all of those points before. Put up a photograph that Saudi Gazette tweeted of the king and the Chinese president performing the sword dance. Holger, to go back to what Pepper was talking about, Russia ruble weakens beyond 80.1 per dollar, records fresh historic low as oil trades below $28. And on the 5th of October 2015, I said Putin is a geopolitical grandmaster. I said he fancies himself the fly catcher and Syria the fly trap. And I said the speed of execution of his intervention confirms that Russia is once again a geopolitical actor. And this will have to be considered. It is a breathtaking rebound, I said. And I concluded by saying President Obama is now probably considering how he can wrestle the oil price to $20. Al Jazeera said Tajikistan police have shaved nearly 13,000 men's beards in an attempt to stem radicalism. Larry Fink, for those constantly focused on re-election and nothing more. We need a revolution. Unfortunately, now the revolution may be Donald Trump. And then a comment from Benjamin Disraeli, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, many years ago. So you see, my dear Coningsby, that the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. Currency markets, euro is at 108.92, awaiting Mario Draghi testimony. Dollar index 99.02, Japanese yen 117.10, Swissy 10030, the pound 141.68. The Aussie, which has been up and down of late, is at 0.6906. India rupee 68.065, South Korean won 12.1422, the Rial now above 410 at 410.38, Egyptian pound 782.91, and the South African rand at 1683.42. I think everyone has thrown in the towel as long as President Zuma is president. Dollar yen, let me put up a 6-month chart. My target is 105 in point of fact. Dollar sterling, I'll put up a 6-month chart of that as well. And there I have a 136 target, followed by a big outlier call for parity. Gold was last trading at just around 1100. a little bit off its recent highs. I wrote severally about the oil price, and in August last year I talked about how the meltdown is coming, and look at it now. I'll put up a 6-month chart of March crude oil in New York, which I think had its biggest one-day fall for quite a while. Saudi Arabia is said to ban betting against the currency, speculation mounting that the world's biggest oil exporter won't be able to maintain the rial's peg to the dollar. The Saudi Arabian Monetary Agency told lenders to halt the sale of options contracts on rial forwards. The directive, issued at a January 18 meeting in Riyadh, applies to local banks and the Saudi branches of international banks, the people said. Saudi rial forwards for the next 12 months rose as high as 906 points before closing at 900. The stock index has been falling sharply since the Iranian news was received. Volatility in the forwards market has been based on a misperception about Saudi Arabia's overall economic backdrops of the governor. The kingdom will uphold its mandate of maintaining the 30-year-old peg at 3.75 per dollar. I said tongue-in-cheek, probably looking to get their own shorts on first. Let's move on to sub-Saharan Africa. Top Mozambican opposition official and lawmaker was shot and seriously wounded Wednesday in the city of Beira, Renamo said. This is raising fears that the attack might heighten the political tensions in the country. They have been on a sort of boil for quite a while. Manuel Bissopo had just come out of a press conference where he denounced the kidnappings and killing of 3 of our members when 2 military and security cars gave chase and then attacked him. We would really like to know their motive. Bissopo is the Secretary General of Renamo and a member of the Pan-African Parliament, the legislative arm of the African Union. And clearly tensions are growing there, and we've got to keep an eye on that. I'll put up a photograph of the Beira business district in Beira from 2014. South African all share is down 8.61% this year and closed at a 23-month closing low. Griffon sees the rand at 20 per dollar unless the South African president leaves office. And I wrote about this in December when I said the markets are not interested in President Zuma's explanations. They are seeing a South African president who has gone rogue. Put up a photograph of President Zuma. Dollar rand, as I've said previously, see you at 20. Egyptian pound 783, the Egyptian EGX30 down 17.55% this year, closing at a 29-month low. Nigeria, the bourse is at its lowest level since July 2012 and trades at 6.7 times forward earnings, compared with 10.1 times for the MSCI Emerging Markets Index and 8.6 times for the Frontier Markets Index. Nigerian all shares down 18.53% year to date, but bounced 3.91% yesterday. Ghana is negative 0.06%, probably one of the top performers on the continent. Water levels at the Kariba Dam that straddles the Zimbabwean and Zambian border dropped to just 12% of capacity on January the 18th. And you know, global warming is impacting places like South Africa, which had its lowest precipitation since records were compiled in the 1900s, Zambia, and it's scorching those parts of the world. But interestingly, here in Nairobi, it's a little bit of an El Nino sweet spot, and that's what sort of supports some of the more bullish views I have on the Kenyan economy. Kenya Central Bank holds benchmark lending rate at 11.5%. I was interviewed in The Nation on Monday when I said I would like to think the MPC will stand aside this time around. The central bank acted preemptively last November and Governor Dr. Njoroge was ahead of the curve. The shilling is just shy of a 5-month high, confounding the naysayers, and is behaving with some resilience. Inflation has surely peaked now, and therefore I expect the central banker to bank some of his bona fides and leave rates unchanged. I'd like to wish Bob Collymore a very happy birthday. He's now a bona fide Maasai elder, as he proudly told us last night where I took this photograph. Kenya shilling 102.35, staying Teflon. Nairobi all share down 4.72% year to date, but obviously outperforming South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria. NSE 20 down more than the all share, 6.04%, and closed at a 42-month low. If you need to check any listed share, there is a link there on Rich Wrap-Ups. Very interesting piece, Reuters via Nature, prehistoric massacre in Kenya, called oldest evidence of warfare. Man's inhumanity to man, an 18th century Scottish poet Robert Burns put it, is no recent development. Scientists said on Wednesday they had found the oldest evidence of human warfare, fossils of a band of people massacred by a troop of attackers, with weapons including arrows, clubs, stone blades, on the shores of a lagoon in Kenya about 10,000 years ago. The remains of 27 people from a Stone Age hunter-gatherer culture were unearthed at a site called Nataruk, roughly 20 miles west of Lake Turkana in northern Kenya. I've never been there, I'd love to go. One man's skeleton was found with a sharp blade made of a volcanic glass called obsidian. Remember that, because I'm going to show you some. I took a photo, but that was miles away at Oligasai on the way to Lake Magadi. Volcanic glass called obsidian still embedded in his skull. Another man had wounds from 2 blows to the head, apparently with a club crushing his skull. A woman in the last stages of pregnancy appeared to have been bound by her hands and feet. Victims also had projectile wounds to the neck and broken skulls, hands, knees and ribs. University of Cambridge paleoanthropologist Marta Mirazon-La said evidence indicates these people who hunted animals, caught fish and gathered edible plants were slain in a premeditated attack by raiders, perhaps from another region. It is a brutal, physical, lethal attack with the intention to kill those individuals who could put up a defense or mount a counterattack, or who perhaps were of no use to them, whether it was a man or a very pregnant woman, too young or too old. Our species arose 200,000 years ago in Africa. Many scholars have thought warfare first emerged long after the time of the Nataruk people, when humans formed settled communities instead of a nomadic hunter-gatherer existence. Nataruk fossils raise the question of whether warfare has been part of the human experience for much longer than previously thought. There were remains of 21 adults, 6 children, most under 6, no older teenagers. Whether they managed to escape or were taken, we will never know. At the end, all massacres are savage. How many people do we have from our very recent and current history? But finding the remains of a massacre among the skeletons of hunter-gatherers of this period was totally surprising. Look at this photograph I took of stone hand axes in Oligasai. Kenya rattled as Shabab turned sights on Somalia military targets. This is a very hard-hitting article in the New York Times. Attackers burst into the Kenyan military base in Somalia before dawn, blasting through the gate with a truckload of explosives. Scores of Shabab militants then flooded through the flames on foot and in trucks, firing heavy guns into the plastic-covered shelters where the Kenyan soldiers were sleeping. The battle was over before it started. The Shabab did their homework and completely wiped them out. Somali and Western officials now say that 80 to 100 Kenyan soldiers and possibly more were massacred during the attack, which took place on Friday at the El Adi forward operating base. The Shabab overran the base, held it for several hours, made off with sensitive communications equipment, artillery pieces that can fire 10 miles, and several American-made armoured Humvees. Since then, Kenya's leaders have refused to disclose the number of dead or other details, trying to soften the blow of what might be the worst military disaster in the country's history. This has been a shock, said Yusuf Hassan, Member of Parliament. We're not Burundi, we're not Ethiopia, we're not Uganda. Our country does not have a history of war. We've never experienced anything like this, he said. They've killed scores of soldiers, stolen their arsenals. Their propaganda videos show alarming amounts of guns, vehicles, and overflowing buckets of bullets now in their hands. This is going to end no time soon, said Mr. David Anderson, Professor of African History at Warwick University. The Kenyan Army's incursion simply brought the Shabab deeper into Kenya, setting off a string of increasingly devastating suicide missions that have killed hundreds of civilians, hurt the economy, especially the tourism industry. Boniface Mwangi criticized President Kenyatta for attending political rallies in the Mombasa area this past week. It's a national shame that our president is busy politicking while the dead bodies are coming home, he said. This was a big error on the part of the president's handlers. Particularly, look at this photo, the coffin of 4 Kenyan soldiers at an airport in Nairobi on Monday. And he should have been there to receive them, surely. Points to consider from an article by John Aglinby, published in the Financial Times. I'll leave you with these about Kenya. Mr. Ashbourne of Capital Economics said that while growth is not going to be good, as the government expected, to elsewhere in Africa, it's not doing badly. It's easy to be pessimistic about Kenya compared to its potential, but it is likely to be one of the best performers in Africa.